the commission, and there was a lot of discussion in committee about the fact that we ought to make it a little more permissive versus, well, just kind of tone it down, if you will. And so I have an amendment that I have put together. We'll see if the committee wants this amendment or something else. So if you would hand that out. I have shown, I don't know if everyone on the committee, I apologize if you haven't seen it, but I tried to get it to where everyone on the committee had an opportunity to see this proposed amendment previous to today's meeting. And this simply, you can see on page 1, it strikes requiring and allowing. So that way it allows members rather than requires. And then on the back side, it says that it strikes or members of the commission. Well, you can see what it says, but it also then puts members may submit to the commission proposed rules and regulations. So, so we can get discussion started, I'm going to make a motion that we amend Senate Bill 211 with the balloon. Is there a second? All right, Senator Reichman seconds. Now discussion on the motion. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my concern is saying that members of the commission may submit to the commission any proposed rules and regulations. I did ask about that during our discussion, and again with our revisor, and I got a response about what she learned about proposed rules and regulations, and I'm wondering if she would be willing to share that with the committee.
Advisor Lawrence, if you're willing to share, we're willing to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did reach out to one of our rules and regulations revisor asking if the term proposed has a specific meaning when it comes to rules and regulations. And she said there is not a specific definition, but she then said she would never call regulations that haven't been submitted to the Attorney General for review to be proposed. So anything that hasn't made it to that point in the process, she would not consider a proposed rule and regulation.
All right. I'll just turn back to you, Senator Francisco, if you have questions or if the committee has questions after you're finished on.
So this was my concern, and the concern about the additional money in the fiscal note to have another lawyer, because the commission then, or an individual commissioner, would need to be able to have the services of a lawyer to get it to the place that it's a proposed rule and regulation. And Mr. Chair, I hesitate to do this, but since we would come back to this, I might make a substitute motion.
All right.
Thank you. So I do have a substitute motion, and it's an amendment that I talked with Tamara. And thank you very much for your reaching out and sharing with us your wording. And I apologize, I stopped by your office just before 5 last night, and should have probably sent you something.
Why don't you go ahead and explain your amendment, and then we'll look for a motion, and so we can have discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This change in the heading also talks about providing for discussion of rules and regulations at commission meetings, and it talks about or adds the wording that at any meeting of the commission, the chairperson of the commission or a majority of the commission may request that discussion of a rule and regulation be added to the commission's agenda. And I think this is what I heard from the testimony from Lauren Sill yesterday, that, and I was able to reach her on the phone, and she agreed that this is the process that is now in place, that the chair can talk about a rule or regulation. And this also allows, because it says a majority, this would allow any commissioner to make a motion at the meeting. And if that motion gets a majority of the votes, then that rule and regulation could be added. And I think what this does is make what we heard, what was happening at the meetings, clear.
So are you finished with your explanation?
I would stand for questions.
Oh, well, we're going to need a motion before we start discussion.
I move the amendment.
Okay, there's a motion to amend, a substitute motion to amend Senate Bill 211 with the balloon by Senator Francisco. Is there a second? Second by Senator Ware. Okay, now discussion or questions on the motion. The proponents of the legislation, their whole concern was the fact that they felt commission members were being shut out by the secretary because current statute, according to the understanding of several, was that the secretary was the only one that could propose a rule or regulation or even discuss a proposed rule or regulation. So questions, committee, on the Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One reason why I do like this is that it'll still take a majority of the commissioners, if my understanding is amendment, to proceed with the regulation. And one of the concerns of the people that were against the bill, they're concerned that one person may take off and do something, even though it did take a majority vote to pass something.
I understand what you're saying. One person could hear the chair of the commission or majority of the commission. But other discussion, questions? Senator Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the proponents of this bill are interested in accomplishing something that I guess would be somewhat reflective of something that we all have the ability to do as sitting senators, is to, in essence, we can task a reviser to say, we would like a statute that accomplishes X. Could you please draft me a bill that accomplishes X? And then we submit it and it goes through the process. And I think that that's what the commission is seeking, at least as kind of a collective group, to be able to say, we as a commission, according to a majority vote, would be interested in developing a regulation that, you know, pick your topic, accomplishes X. Could you please draft a regulation that would accomplish X, and then we can put it through the process and determine if we think that that would be a good regulation. And I think that's the ask, and that's the gap, is that right now only the secretary could promulgate a new regulation. The commission themselves could not promulgate. And maybe that's I'm trying to achieve some sort of legal technical term. I'd leave it to the reviser to come up with that. But I think that's the essence that they're looking for, is to be able to start and initiate that process according to a majority vote of the commission. I'm not sure that this amendment accomplishes that, or even that the original bill accomplishes that. But I think my understanding in talking with the proponents is that's what they are seeking. And maybe I can direct this question to Revisor Lawrence, but I think promulgate would be kind of what they're trying to say. We want to initiate the process of drafting a regulation according to the majority interest of the majority vote of the body of the commission.
So is there a question or not so much?
So I guess if Revisor Lawrence would be willing to comment on that, but.
If you're willing to comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Whatever the will of the committee is the words that we will put down.
I understand that. But yeah, we don't turn our revisers loose very often because we want to keep them on a short leash. But did that satisfy your question, Senator Shane, or do you have additional clarification you would like?
No, but I guess I would say in that discussion, I welcome conversation with the committee. I'm wondering, and I don't know that we would have necessarily time to work it in today, but I guess I would be interested in evaluating a potential amendment that would try to really directly address what the proponents are seeking and do that. And so maybe I can go to the side and talk to Revisor Lawrence about if we can try to put something together. But I'd say with the current amendment, I don't know that I would support the current amendment because I don't think it fits the overall objective and goal of the proponents.
Senator Ware?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess from what we heard yesterday, I'm wondering why some commissioners feel like they don't have a voice. It sounded to me like they very much do, and that honestly, I don't see the problem that we're solving, I guess.
On that, Senator Ware, my understanding is it depends on who the secretary is or acting secretary. The impression I've gotten from proponents of the legislation was that the current acting secretary and previous secretary were fairly heavy-handed with the commission. And so the commissioners felt like they were not being heard. So the conferee yesterday, I got the impression it had been a little while at least since she'd been on the commission. I don't even remember when it was, but okay, so, but nevertheless, that was the intent of the legislation. So we'll continue to discuss this, and then if this goes on, it goes on. If it doesn't, we're back to the other. If it goes on, fine. If not, then we'd be back to the original bill. And it can still, Senator Shane, to address your concern, if the bill goes out of committee and then you learn more and want to try to amend it on the floor, should the bill run across the floor. This is not the last train out of town, but we do want to try to get it right. We do want to try to get it so this committee feels like it's correct. Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that Senator Shane has come on something here that this doesn't solve the real problem. But I think the intent that the chair had in his amendment by changing the word requiring to allowing was something that, and if I read the same words from Adam Proffitt, which is Director of Budget, which represents the governor's office, said Senate Bill 211 would also allow members of the commission to submit proposed regulations and rules. I think that was the intent of what the governor's office thought this meant. And I think the allowing here, I also thought it was interesting, the testimony of the attorney working for the secretary, how he said, I don't work for the commission, I work for the secretary. And so basically that was, he does, if they want to have somebody like a revisor, they must hire their own revisor, basically is what he was saying. So I would support the original motion, basically because of what the governor's office says their intent of this bill was.
Additional questions, comments? Seeing none, Senator Francisco, you may close on your motion.
I had a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So, and this is a question for Senator Shane because he brought up and had talked with the proponents. So the original motion or original amendment talks about members of the commission, not a majority of the members. So when he, oh good, he's writing right now. But, so I'm just asking if you believe, I think my concern is that we started with something that was not a majority of the commission. It was an individual member of the commission. And so that's what, that's one of the things I was trying to put in. And then still have the concern that you say a member is not, an individual member, I think it would be very difficult to submit to the commission proposed rules and regulations if they already had to be in that process of being reviewed by the Secretary of State, getting the stamp from the Attorney General. There's 3 stamps you have to get as part of that process. So, Senator Shane, do you have some wording that would better fit?
Senator Shane, you're not the one that made the motion. You have been asked a question. It's up to you whether you answer or not. I kind of like for committee members to answer, but the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Francisco. I agree. I think that it would be problematic to try to get it all the way through the regulatory development process and introduce the finished proposed regulation. And I think that was the hangup. And I believe in testimony, I maybe asked the question of what does proposed regulation mean? So I'm glad that you asked that question. And I could also see the concerns for any single commissioner having the ability to trigger the agency to, I guess I'll just go to promulgate, for lack of a better word, to essentially start developing and working on a potential new regulation. But giving the body the ability to vote on it, I think is maybe a separate question. Because I would say, to Senator Alley's point earlier, the attorney that we heard from, I also get a little bit concerned hearing that he's the attorney for the secretary. I would interpret that he's the attorney for the agency and represents all the interests of KDWP, not just of the secretary himself. I don't think that he's the secretary's personal attorney, a professional attorney in the capacity as secretary. But so I guess to get back to, I agree with the sentiment that that proposed essentially finished work product would be where there's the hang up. And I agree with that sentiment that's the case. With the chair's permission, while the reviser and I keep going back and forth, I would encourage us to go ahead and close on proposed amendments, and then maybe I would come with some potential wording as we keep moving.
All right. No further discussion. Senator Francisco, you may close on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This wording, I believe, would allow the chair or the majority of the commission to request the discussion of a rule and regulation to be added to the commission's agenda, and I think that's the first step in promulgating a rule or regulation. I move my amendment.
You've heard the motion to amend with the balloon as presented by Senator Francisco. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Motion appears to fail. Motion does fail. We are back on the original motion to amend. And so a discussion on that balloon. Seeing none. I had offered this amendment as an attempt to accomplish what the proponents were requesting, but also, if you will, tone it down so it's not going to be run by one member. It still was going to require a majority of the commission to allow a member to propose rules and regulations. Basically, I would read this amendment as allowing members to tell the other commissioners, I'd like to see us discuss this. And then if the commission proposes, then they move forward. So with that, I will go ahead and close on the motion to amend with the balloon that was presented.
Can we ask any questions?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciated your comments that you thought it was a majority. Can you walk me through that wording where it would be a majority of the commission, not a single member?
Members of the balloon, members of the commissions may submit to the commission, which to me, anything submitted to the commission then would take a majority of the commission to adopt or propose any suggested rules or regulation. That's where I come up with that it's because one member is proposing to the commission, and it's up to the commission, which of course is going to be a majority of the commission.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So my only concern now, and we might take that up afterwards, would be keeping the word proposed in that. Thank you for that answer.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and move the amendment so we can vote. All in favor of adopting the first amendment that was proposed, signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion appears to pass. Motion does pass. Senator Shane, you had said that you may have something for the good of the committee after we dispose of those two previous motions. Senator Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll leave it to your discretion. Obviously, there's a very, very rough draft form language, not an official amendment that would be prepared to presentation to the committee, and so I could certainly present the idea and then hold it for the floor, but I'll leave it to the discretion of the chair.
I would prefer to deal with it in committee if we could, and so this would be a conceptual, but you have some wording?
Yes, sir. Since you have the language in your hand, would you like to read it to the committee, or would you like to pass it back to me and I'll read it to the committee?
I thought this was my personal copy. So, Reviser, this would, as far as fitting in with the previously adopted balloon, this would fit where? Can you tell me where it would fit? Or tell the committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would recommend to the committee that this sentence that you will hear shortly be added on page 2 in line 20 after the sentence that ends Kansas.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'll go ahead and read the sentence.
Just a moment. I'm sorry, I was looking down, I didn't realize our revisor was finished. So you said that you would put this at the end of the sentence in line 20?
Following that sentence, yes. So this would be a new sentence. Yes.
After the word Kansas, period, then insert.
Correct.
Senator Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the conceptual language would read as follows. The commission may, by a majority vote, direct the secretary to research, assess, develop, or change any existing or potential rule and regulation. Yes. The commission may, by majority vote, direct the secretary to research, assess, develop, or change any existing or potential rule and regulation.
I would, just a moment, we'll have you read it again, but I would think that would fit at the end of the just adopted amendment. Not necessary. Because I would think it would add to what was here. Okay, and we would, unless we directed, we would give our reviser the leeway to put it at the end of the word Kansas on line 20 or at the end of the proposed balloon, which I think it fits there. But so there's been a request for you to read that again.
Yes, yep, absolutely, happily.
And so I'm thinking, committee, that if this language that Senator Shane's getting ready to read were put at the end of, on the balloon that was adopted, page 2, after the word regulations, rather than on line 20, that's where and I'm not a reviser, I'm not an attorney. But anyway, go ahead and read.
Okay. The commission may, by majority vote, direct the secretary to research, assess, develop, or change any existing or potential rule and regulation.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am worried about the direction to say that the secretary may change a rule and regulation, because I would always like those rules and regulations to come back to the commission for a vote after they've been promulgated. So I think it would be more important to direct the secretary to research and advise, but I don't think you want the secretary to be changing a regulation without it being going back to the vote of a commission. Does that make sense?
I can see your potential concern with the wording. I think that regardless, any change to the regulation is still going to have to go through the approval process. So I guess we would have to just carefully consider if this language would be at conflict with the standard regulation development process, if it could be interpreted that it gives him the authority to change without review and subsequent vote. I don't know that it would do that, but I'm certainly happy to massage this language a little bit to make sure that it's reflective of its intent.
On that note, rather than us try to continue to do something on the fly, I'm going to ask that Senator Shane, you get amendment with the reviser of balloon, and so we will not pass this bill out of committee today, but we will take it up as soon as we have an opportunity at a future meeting, because we've already invested quite a bit of time on a bill. So we will move committee to Senate Bill 213 and see what the committee's desires are with Senate Bill 213. And just briefly, since it's been a while since we looked at 213, if our reviser could remind us what the bill does.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 213 would prohibit non-residents from hunting migratory waterfowl during the hunting season, except on Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays. This prohibition would apply on certain federal lands and waters that are listed in the bill, but would not apply to certain other areas and waters that are listed in the bill.
And remind the committee on page 4 where it strikes the dollar amounts and changes it, what is reasoning for that in the bill?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on page 4, the bill would also reduce the migratory waterfowl habitat stamp maximum fee for residents from $200 to $20, and would also reduce the maximum fee for non-residents from $1,500 to $100.
All right. Questions of the reviser? Senator Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Reviser Lawrence, so if I'm looking at this correctly, please tell me if I'm not. So right now, the migratory waterfowl habitat stamps would have carried a maximum fee of $8, and then it's striking a mussel fishing license, which quite honestly, I didn't know that we had mussel fishing licenses in Kansas, and would then replace the maximum 8 with a resident and a non-resident waterfowl stamp of 20 and 100, so effectively increasing the maximum resident stamp fee and creating a new non-resident waterfowl stamp fee that is greater than the resident. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yes, thank you, Senator Shane and Mr. Chairman. I was misreading that, and you were reading it correctly. Currently, the maximum is $8, and this would change the resident maximum to $20 and the non-resident maximum to $100, and would eliminate the mussel fishing license fees.
Senator Shane, does that answer your question satisfactorily?
Yes, thank you.
So it is an increase in the fee for the migratory waterfowl stamps for residents, more than double, and for non-residents, well, you can do the math. It goes from a maximum of 8. So apparently the current statute, there was not a difference between resident and non-resident, correct, reviser?
Correct. The way it currently reads in statute, the line says migratory waterfowl habitat stamps, maximum $8.
All right, thank you. Questions, committee, or discussion, motions on Senate Bill 213? If no one wants to address the bill, we can keep it in committee, or if you want to pass it out. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that we pass Senate Bill 213 favorably for passage.
There is a motion to pass Senate Bill 213 favorably. Is there a second on the second by Senator Titus? Discussion on the motion. Seeing none. Oh, Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being an old duck hunter, when you talk Cheyenne Bottoms and this being federal stuff that comes into this, we sure want economic or tourism. And so I've been around in El Dorado where guys pulled in and had a big boat and Texas tag, spending a lot of money that says, I really don't want to discourage that. And I don't know, I'm concerned that that could discourage that. So I just throw that out for conversation that I haven't hunted for 40 years, so things could have changed out at Cheyenne Bottoms, but that's kind of my concern with that. And I don't know how many, I see the map here it's showing non-residents and residents, what's going on. And so I think on the surface, I'd be kind of opposed to that. So that's just my thoughts in the process.
So Senator Fagg, are you talking about the fee structure change or the bill overall?
I'd say I like the fees going up, you know, that part of it. But as far as the Monday, changing those dates when you can't hunt, that could get kind of confusing. I'd hate to come up here from Texas and find out I can't hunt today, so.
So you're saying Texans don't have the capabilities to know what day of the week it is?
Well, knowing what the law is. Things are so complicated anymore. So I like part of it, and I dislike part of it. So it'd be one of those kind of things that I'd probably lean towards a no on this at this point. That's just me.
Welcome to the Kansas Senate. You have to make decisions. You like some things you don't like in this bill. Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am not a hunter either, but I did find the testimony compelling about sort of protecting the resource and making sure it's available for Kansans first, as much as we want to encourage the commercial activity. I think this bill strikes a reasonable balance between those objectives, so I'll be supporting it.
Senator Bowser.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll also be supporting this bill. I went to wild hog hunting in Oklahoma last year and paid an exorbitant out-of-state hunting fee, but I did that because I wanted the hunting experience and didn't mind doing it. I'll support this bill. Thank you.
This bill doesn't have anything to do with hunting hogs. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased that part of the proponents' testimony for this was that they had worked with the Wildlife Commission. And the Wildlife Commission is actually the group that had discussed, solicited public input, and is suggesting that they have a desire for a legislative change. So as we've talked about trying to honor our Wildlife Commission and their intent, I think it would be sensible to support this.
Further discussion on the motion to pass out favorably. Seeing none, Senator Francisco, you can close on your motion.
I move that we pass this bill out favorably.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. So we have a few moments, committee. We're going to go ahead and spend a little bit of time. My understanding is that some of the members who have stepped out are for page pictures and so forth. We're going to go ahead and get started, and that's about all we're going to do is get started on some budgetary items, because next week we will have the great privilege of spending a lot of time delving into agency budgets. The current plan is on Monday. We will look at the Thank you. Thank you. The State Fair and the State Water Plan. Then Tuesday, it's the Department of Agriculture, right? And then Wildlife and Parks on Tuesday. And then Wednesday will be KDHE, the Division of Environment. Thursday, we will wrap everything up and make a committee recommendation, because then the following Monday, the chair has the responsibility of reporting the budget recommendation by the committee to the full Ways and Means Committee. So, Mr. Drury, whatever you've got for us, I apologize, you've got about 10 minutes or so, but we're not going to throw any time away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Again, my name is Luke Drury, and I'm a senior fiscal analyst with Legislative Research. And given the just a bit of time that we have today, I thought it'd be beneficial to go over the State Water Plan Fund, the changes that were made by the House to that budget. So on the, or I should say to that fund across all of the budgets that you will be hearing except for the State Fair. So the blue sheet is the State Water Plan Fund table as it currently stands, as approved by House Sub for HB 2007. You will note here that if you flip over onto the back page, I just want to draw your attention to a couple of items. The top table there, you will see new lines of appropriation in the agency's request, all State Water Plan Fund agencies, so that includes Department of Agriculture, the Water Office, the Division of Environment, KDHE, Wildlife and Parks, and the Geological Survey. They had proposed to condense lines of appropriation that were traditional, which is on the front page what you see, those mini litany of items. They had requested to condense those to the 5 buckets that you see there up at the top. As you can see, there are a few expenditures remaining in the House position. That is because the House's recommendation was to break those new buckets back out into traditional lines of appropriation for the Department of Agriculture, for the Water Office, and for the Division of Environment. Those are the agencies that receive the highest amount of appropriations for State Water Plan Fund. I also want to draw your attention to the bottom of the back page here, and you will see that as it currently stands, the State Water Plan Fund is over appropriated by about $12.2 million. That is given current law and the current House position. With that being said, the House did pass House Bill 2113, which has been referred to this committee. As it stands with that, if that were to become law in its current form, the State Water Plan Fund would have an ending balance of about $1.3 million. So that's just a note for you all, but as it currently stands, my State Water Plan Fund table is a reflection of current law and the current House position. So with that being said, there were some changes, as I noted, the 5 buckets being broken back out into older legacy line items of appropriation. I have also included a stapled packet, and this is our shorthand. For those members that have seen budget work before, this will look familiar. Essentially, this item or this packet will show you, and I apologize, you do have some public safety agencies there at the top. So there at the bottom of page, my sheet says 25 of 32 is the beginning of the agriculture budgets. But if you flip over then onto the next page, that's for 2026, and this is for the KDA. This document will show you changes that the House made to the LBC's recommendation. So the LBC that met over the interim did not recommend any changes to the agency's request, which included the new 5 buckets. During the House's work and the House's recommendation was to break those back out. So you will note then, for example, item number 2 here, anytime you see SWPF, State Water Plan Fund, Crop and Livestock Research, for example, that then shows that was added by the House. In the agency's request and in the Legislative Budget Committee's recommendation, that was not included because, again, it was collapsed into those new 5 buckets. So with that being said also, I will note, and again, these are items I think it'll be beneficial for the committee to have a primer on this before we get into the individual budgets. But if you flip over onto page 27 of 32, item 15, for example, you'll see State Water Plan Fund enhancements. The House Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources budget had included some enhancements to the State Water Plan Fund for the agency. They had recommended for those to go into the older buckets, or the new buckets. Now, you'll see like item 20, delete State Water Plan Fund appropriations. As part of the whole process, some more money was added in, then everything was deleted out, and then it was reworked to bring it back into the legacy lines of appropriation. I will note that overall, the recommendations from the House for State Water Plan Fund above the agency's request is $11.2 million. So there was an add of $11.2 million in State Water Plan Fund over the agency's request. I would note, though, for those interested, that that number is still lower than what was in the governor's recommendation for State Water Plan Fund expenditures as well. So, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to stand for questions regarding the State Water Plan Fund, these traditional legacy lines of appropriation. I guess I would note, for those interested, the Kansas Water Office did produce it is now called the approved budget packet, and that can be found online. And that essentially shows their recommendation for those 5 buckets to change from the traditional lines of appropriation into those 5 new line items. That is available online. But as I indicated, through work in the House, it's the House's position to break those buckets out into the older, more traditional lines of appropriation. So, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to stand for any questions that the committee may have.
So for clarification, the blue sheet, as you gave it to us, is the House position as established in sub for House 20-7.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
And then just for the committee's benefit, and you can make sure that I get this straight, Mr. Drury, the Ways and Means Committee deleted all EDIF money, and so that would have been stripped out. So when you turn the page over and you see the $2 million EDIF, which is lottery money, Economic Development Initiatives Fund transfer of $2 million, that would not be there currently in the Ways and Means, correct?
Mr. Chair, I do know the expenditures were deleted. I believe that you are correct that those transfers were also deleted. So yes, you would need to back that out. So then you would show a 0 there for the current Senate position, right? So that would then change the ending balance number according to the sheet. But again, this is the House's position, as you indicated.
Same way with the white sheets, this is House position. So
absolutely correct.
Work on this committee to make certain that we have a Senate position that most likely will be different and smaller, hopefully, than the House position. But committee, I wanted you to have this information so you could go ahead and see, just ignore the top part, Norton Correction, Sentencing, and et cetera. Just go down to the bottom where it's got Department of Agriculture, and you will see the very first thing on there is not going to be something that the chair is going to be supportive of. Add 2.5 FTE or 2.2 FTE positions. They will have to justify to us, committee, why in the world do they need to add government workers? I have asked because COGE, our Committee on Government Efficiency, has requested information on, this is something that has long frustrated the chair, information regarding funded vacant positions. This is money the legislature has given to agencies to hire individuals, and a lot of these positions remain vacant for a long period of time. And then the money, my words, is used as a slush fund by the agencies. Not all of it sometimes, but a portion of it. And that has never sat well with me. They call shrinkage. And, okay, for the new members, Mr. Drury, explain shrinkage. And for the old members, because I never can figure it out.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. So when an agency budgets, they I'll use a relatively simple example here. Let's say they have an office assistant, they have an accountant, and they have an attorney. Okay, so when the fiscal year starts, they want all 3 of those positions to be fully funded for the entirety of the fiscal year, right? So that's July 1 to June 30. What shrinkage will occur if, let's say, that accountant leaves employment in October, and they put out trying to hire somebody, they can't get anybody in the door until January. So that time that collapsed between October to January is shrinkage. That is savings because they had planned for those positions to be fully funded the entire fiscal year. When that doesn't happen, that money is savings. It's not being expended on those salaries and wages. So agencies typically will budget some form of shrinkage, right? Full employment for all, especially the larger agencies, for all the FTEs that they employ. simply realistically doesn't happen. People retire, people take new positions, they leave employment, what have you, people are terminated, et cetera. So there will always be some level of shrinkage. So that, Mr. Chair, is how I would describe shrinkage for the committee.
And for all of us, but particularly for those that have only been here for a couple months, you will hear some words in the legislature that make 0 sense. Shrinkage is one of them. To me, enhancements is another one of them. An enhancement means an increase in taxpayer money. An agency, when they say, well, we have an enhancement of this, enhancement means we're requesting more taxpayer money. And I know that a lot of people don't like that terminology, but I don't like the word enhancement. So, be that as it may. Briefly, committee questions of our
White sheet, the shorthand that I shared with you, there are a couple of items on there that you will not, that do affect these agencies that you will not see, and that is because they are statewide global adjustments. On the blue sheet, you will see at the very bottom of the first page, there's a bulleted line down there, state employee pay. The legislature, the House's recommendation is for a state employee pay plan that is different than the governor's recommendation. So that is included in there, and that is, I call those a below-the-line adjustment. Those will require state finance council certification process, so that's not going to show in your shorthand. Another item that is not going to show is a reduction of 1.5 SGF in operating expenditures, so that's salaries and wages, contractual services, and commodities. That does not include state aid payments, debt service, et cetera. And then finally, there's also a recommendation to delete funding for all vacant SGF-funded positions. Now, that is a point in time. So that is on July 30, I believe, or there's a date in there, that if these positions are not filled, then the amount of money that is appropriated to them will be lapsed. So there's not a time in it being unfilled for 80 days, 60 days. That is simply a point-in-time recommendation as it stands. Those are items that I don't have numbers for each agency because it will require a certification process. They are part of the budget recommendations, but they will not show here on your shorthand.
questions briefly, committee, before we adjourn for our fiscal analyst. I appreciate you providing the committee some very basic information to get started. And committee, you've got things to look at here.